Brilliant, we are recording. Okay, so let me just walk you through once more what is expected of you to pass, get a merit, and then get a distinction for 1B. Okay, so this is a blank version of the document on the screen that you can see. First thing you're going to want to do is, obviously you've all done this already, is to make a copy of it, but then there's a few things that you want to delete. This bit here, for example, make your own copy of this document. We don't need to see that. Okay, so you delete that. And then here it says name. You want to put your name. That's right. I find it quite amazing how many of you don't actually put your name in the work. So make sure your name's in it and delete that statement. That's just a little instruction that the moderator doesn't need to see. Here we go. So we have put the criteria at the top of this document. So I'm just going to talk through this very quickly before I go into detail about how you can achieve these particular criteria. All right. So in order to get a pass, you need to be explaining the different techniques that are used in animation and describe the uses for digitized animation. That is basically the first section of this task. Okay, so that first sort of table, that is for the pass criteria. And in order to hit the pass criteria, you have to explain and describe each element that we've put into that table. Explain and describe, I'm afraid, is not one sentence. Okay, the expectation with these research documents is that you demonstrate that you've actually done a bit of research. Okay, so that does mean that you can quote your research. I'm doing little air quotes. You can quote your research, but that means if you are going to quote your research, then you do need to put it in quotation marks, and you do need to put the URL that you've used for that information into the box as well. If you don't reference your quotes, and if you just put them in there as your own words, then that is bad. Okay, because that is technically plagiarizing. So you really must you need to write it all in your own words, and if you are going to be using quotes, then you need to put your own words in there as well to connect the ideas in the quotes. And if you're going to use quotes, those quotes need to be referenced. That means I want to see the URL. I want to see where that information comes from. Because if you're just using that research in your own words, that is bad. Okay, that's really what you can't put in any of your work ever. Okay, because that's a big deal. So that first table, that is for the pass criteria. The second table is where you're going to be achieving your merit and distinction criteria. Okay, so for the merit, it's when you're talking about the target audience and this key word, the suitability of animations for the target audience. The suitability. Now that is in there, that question is in the prompting questions down in the first column, but some of you missed it, which means that you've missed out on the merit. So some of you need to go back in and make that really obvious that you're using that word suitability for the target audience. And for the distinction level, comparing different styles of animation across global cultures. That's why we've chosen a British film and a Japanese film as well, okay, Ghibli film, so that we've got really great opportunities to compare different cultures. Okay, so let's go back to this particular task. Okay, so let's go back to this first bit, this table. This is for the pass. Okay, you will have watched the history of animation video. Yep, and there are resources there to help you with this one. So we've shown you some resources, and there's lots of video links about the history of animation. We've put like hints down the side. So yep, so we've put hints down the side of what you should look at for your examples. Okay, and you should be conducting your own research as well. Okay, so you need a few sentences to describe what it is. Okay, the examples and the images, it is really helpful for you if you actually use the images that match the examples that you're talking about. Okay, and it is best where it says examples for you not just to put like avatar, just the word, but to actually explain how that is relevant to the particular style of animation that you're talking about. Okay, so you're basically doing a definition followed by an example that explains the definition. Okay, because if I take you back up here, explain the different techniques, describe the uses. If you do like 2 or 3 sentences here on what it is, and actually talk about the examples, not just put a word there, not just put like, for example, go to the dinosaur, actually use a sentence more like, you can see in this image that go to the dinosaur is a line drawing technique. Yep. What for a lot of these, when you're explaining what it is, especially for this early style of animation that goes all the way from line drawing to cell animation, what you're dealing with there is essentially a series of still images. And what I want to know in what it is how they become animated. Like you, for some of them, for cell animation, you've told me that they are drawn, but you haven't actually told me like what, how they're made to move. Okay, so that is something that I think you can do with exploring a little bit more in your definitions. Okay, so these aren't just still images, they're moving images. How do you go from the hand drawn image to something that is moving? Okay, so the first few ones are your classic like hand drawn cell and line animation, and then we're getting more towards different types. We've got claymation. It makes sense for you to use Wallace and Gromit there. If you want to repeat, that's fine. Some of you have got really good examples here for the live action with animation techniques. And here we go, 2D and 3D animations. Okay, so a lot of you have got good definitions and good examples here, but some of them just need a bit of fleshing out. Okay. And character animation. This is a little bit of repetition here, but what I think for your examples and your images, what I think would be a good idea for you to bear in mind is think about a really strong character that has been created. It could be something like, thank you. It could be something like Shrek, or it could be something like Coraline, something that's got a really strong sense of a character animation, something that's really driven by character, a really visual and interesting character from the world of animation. Okay.
Can I put my hand up there, please?
Yes.
So that's an excellent way of approaching that character animation row. Another way could be to think about motion capture.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how strictly it falls within the animation category, but I think that would be a useful thing to discuss in that row there. So you could talk about Gollum in Lord of the Rings, or the Hulk.
Lots of people,
in the Avengers.
Lots of them did talk about that a little bit as well when it comes to the 3D.
Right, the CGI stuff. Yeah, that might stuff. Be more so relevant to CGI.
We are expecting for you to repeat yourself a little bit when it comes to character, okay? Because I know you've talked about animation for like the top, all these boxes so far. Yeah. So you can repeat a character here.
So you could always maybe talk about, if you're struggling to find something there, and you've talked about the Hulk and Gollum in the CGI row, you could talk about Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us in character art. So you could do some video game motion capture. It's animation, whether it's in a video game or a movie, or a Pixar production. So
you could even go old school. You could even do like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
We just want you to think about here a really distinctive character.
Remember, we don't come up with these categories. These are just taken straight from the unit spec. These are what they have asked us to ensure that you analyze.
Yep. So you have to answer everything in order to get the pass on this particular section here, okay? Everything, because everything that is here is straight from the spec. We're not just putting stuff in here for the sake of it. Everything here is something you have to answer to pass in that top section, okay? So now we're starting here at part 2. This is going to take me a little bit longer to talk through. This is for the merit distinction sections. All right, so what we've got here, and the categories that we've put here in this column down the side, those are all categories from the exam board, okay? Not ones that we've just put in. Those are all the things that the exam board require you to discuss. And what you need to do is, you see, we've put the title and underneath we've put little prompts. You actually need to use those prompts. Okay, so I don't want you to just, it's not about describing here. Okay, it's about explaining, analyzing. Okay, because this is the next level. This isn't for the pass, this is for the merit. So we're using a lot of that unit 1 analysis skills that we did way back when we did sequence analysis for Star Wars, which you guys were really good at. So you need to repeat this again. So we have 2 things that we have asked you to look at. We've asked you to look at Aardman Animation's Creature Comforts. Okay, it is an advert. Okay, the Creature Comforts adverts. And the other, that's from the UK, the other one is Spirited Away, Japanese anime. We've deliberately chosen 2 really different texts because for the distinction, you need to be able to compare and contrast. Okay, what the similarities and differences. So we've chosen ones that are going to give you a lot to say here. So listen up, because I'm going to give you lots and lots of tips. But essentially, if you've read the prompts here, then you should be able to manage. But I'm just going to go through each section once more, okay? All right, so if you actually read the blue bit on the top, we've given you more helpful hints. Look, you see we've given you the genre and we've given you the use for the top 2. So genre, comedy, fantasy. Okay, now what's interesting here about that, I'm helping you out here with these compare and contrast sections, is that comedy in particular is very difficult to promote globally. Comedy often, this is a key word, it often doesn't translate into other cultures because comedies usually rely on our cultural understanding. So British comedies tend not to translate well to other cultures. This is why for film, for example, comedies tend not to do as well internationally as a fantasy film or an action film, because explosions and epic, beautiful fantasy sequences don't need cultural translation. Comedy often needs an understanding of the culture in order for it to be funny. For example, I don't know if you've seen like Simon Pegg's films like Hot Fuzz, for example, funny for a British audience, maybe not for an audience with a different cultural background. So if we're thinking about Creature Comforts, a lot of what makes those moments within that product funny are really British. So that's something that you might want to put in that compare and contrast section, this idea that comedy often doesn't translate to other cultures in the same way that a fantasy film might. Now, for use and purpose, I need to reiterate that for Aardman, you are looking at Creature Comforts. You're not looking at a film by Aardman Animation. You're looking at the Creature Comforts advert. And for Studio Ghibli, you're not talking about the trailer. You're talking about the film, the whole film which you have watched. Okay, so just bear that in mind when you're writing. Okay, so please don't reference the trailer for Ghibli, and please don't reference in this section an Aardman Animation film, because you're thinking about the Creature Comforts ones that started as an advert and then it evolved into a TV series. Now, the use for these, if it's an advert, it's promotion and profit. Okay. And for Ghibli, it's a more artistic venture. Okay, so it's for profit and entertainment. Okay, because they're different products, they're going to have different uses, different purposes. Okay. Okay, here we go. Now, this is the characters and the environments. I was a little disappointed when I was reading these because I know that you can do better than this. Okay, I am not in the for the characters. I don't just want a description of all the characters in the films. That's not analyzing. Okay, so what I want to know is think about the for Ghibli, think about the protagonist, think about why is it a young preteen girl? What does that connote? Remember that word? What does that connote? What does that symbolize? What does that imply? It's a coming of age story. It's about coming of age stories are usually about a loss of innocence and a realization of the adult world. Okay, so that is one of the themes of this film, isn't it? The coming of age theme. So it's about loss of innocence and acceptance of the adult world, or rejection of the adult world, a fear of the adult world. So that's why the character is presented as a young innocent. Now, what about the costume? What about the colours? What about the style of her design? The reason why animation is so great to analyse is because, as you now know, nothing's organic. Nothing just happens to be that way. Every single thing is created, okay? The colours that they have selected for that character, the background, the types of shoe, what they do with their hair, everything has been designed. I want you to tell me, if you're going to talk about a character, what the design is and why. Why has it been promoted in that way? What is the theme? It's linking into a theme here. Okay, so we have a young, innocent girl in our Studio Ghibli protagonist, and you can talk about the antagonists, the bad guys, okay, in there as well. What about the design of the bad guy? That should tell us something about what people are afraid of. Yeah, it should tell us something else about the themes of the film. And one of the great things about Spirited Away is that there is so much written about it that you can look up and that you can research, okay, in terms of themes and characters and environments and meaning. So much. That's another reason why we selected it, because it's going to be very easy for you to research this, okay? So there is an expectation that you will have done some Googling, some research, some looking up, some reading. And if you're going to quote from that research, remember we want to see the URL in there as well, okay? So you're not passing it off as your own words, okay? You can reference other people's words, but it needs to be alongside the URL so that you're not saying it's your own work. So make sure we've got that URL in there. And you can't just copy and paste, you need to put your own words in there as well, okay? So it can't all just be from Wikipedia. No. You can use, like, if you're going to quote something, it should be like a very short sentence maximum, okay? Just a little short sentence, and then you talk a bit about from it yourself, okay? So for Creature Comforts, what some of you missed, and I don't know how you managed to miss it. You know that what they did was they interviewed real people, and then they interviewed real people, and they used those voices, those clips from the interviews, and created characters around them, and they created the environments around an interview that they had with somebody. So that's something I think we need to consider within this character design section, okay? The voices of a real person. So we're making a lot of cultural assumptions and really British assumptions. So if they're from the north, have they created a more working class character? Is it a very posh voice? Have they created a posher looking character? Okay, so remember, all the characters have been designed. They're created. Environments and locations as well. We've put more prompting things here too. So if you're talking about the theme of like Britishness in the Aardman animation, the Creature Comforts, then what is like particularly British that you can see? Okay, why do you think they've designed the person's living room to look that way? What do they want you to notice? What is that saying about Britain? And with Studio Ghibli, these are fantasy locations, but they're very much, we've got a contrast here with the locations between the representation of the natural world and the representation of the city. This is a binary opposition. Remember that word from when we did narrative? A binary opposition is part of the themes created by the environments. Natural world, spirituality, peacefulness, compared to a more adult environment, which is the city, which is seen as kind of disgusting. So we've got that comparison there as well. I've put the words here, what do the locations connote and symbolize? In this bit here about themes, Do not be afraid to repeat what you have put in the characters and locations section, okay? You might find that you are repeating yourself a little bit, and that is fine, because we want to know you can re-emphasize here. We want to see that you understand it, okay? So it's a big one, this themes and representations. You can talk about characters, as I've said in the prompt, and places, as I've said in the prompt. Okay, so you can do, it's like a little summary here of Britishness, okay, spirituality, representation of the natural world, all those representation of youth, representation of older characters. In this section, I would expect you to have much more about the Studio Ghibli, because it's a feature-length film, than you would about Aardman in this section, because they are adverts. Okay, the next box. I was expecting, can you see in the prompt that it says narrative theories? I was expecting here discussions about binary oppositions, equilibrium, disruption, new equilibrium. I was expecting to see the word prop. I was expecting to see the word Todorov. You could talk about conflict within the narrative. We spent quite a while, Unit 1, on narrative theory. Okay, if in doubt, you guys were really good at binary oppositions. So what would be the binary oppositions? There's lots in Studio Ghibli, again, because this is a feature film. I would expect a lot more in the Studio Ghibli section. Okay, where's the conflict? What's the binary opposition? Good versus evil. For Aardman, hot versus cold, male versus female. What is the difference here? And yeah, binary oppositions are the big one. Running time for this one, it can be very short. I just want you to write down how long the advert is, that one of the adverts that you're particularly focusing on there. The film running time's in there already, but many of you forgot to answer this very simple question. I gave you this prompt here because it's a very easy way to answer this in terms of the comparison. Did you get a developed character and narrative in this time frame? Okay, so very easy to compare. You're obviously going to get more development in 120 minutes than you are in 1 minute. Okay, here we go. I need to speed up a bit, don't I? This bit here, target audience. Assess the suitability of the target audience. If you don't do this, you're going to get a pass, flat out. Okay, so first thing you need to do, identify the target audience. And then I want you to tell me, is this suitable for them? So for the Creature Comforts, this is an advert. Who's going to be buying the product? It's not kids. I know it's an animation, but it's not aimed at little kids, is it? Because it's an advert for a product that an adult is going to buy. So the target audience, so the primary target audience, the top level target audience is going to be adults, for the people who are paying the bills, people who are buying the product, and then a secondary audience might be the family. Yep. So I want you to tell me what a primary audience might be and what a secondary audience might be. And Studio Ghibli, I'm not sure that the target audience is going to be little kids, because I'm not sure that this product would be suitable for very young children. I think because it's a bit scary, and I think some of the themes are actually quite adult. So the target audience as well kind of reflects the protagonist, doesn't it? Someone who's in the middle of sort of like childhood and adulthood, pre-teen, that coming of age story. So we've got primary and secondary audiences. So you need to identify those audiences. Lots of you did manage to do that, with a couple of misunderstandings that you need to tweak. But then you need to talk about the suitability for the target audience. That is really important for the merit. In fact, what you could do, just to show the moderator that you've really done that, is put in bold the word suitability and the word audience. Yep. So some of the jokes in Creature Comforts are aimed at adults. Are there any bits in the Spirited Away that you feel are aimed at more adults? This is that's a big one for the merit, okay? And then this one should be quite a big summary section, this bit at the bottom on style, because this is a summary that is going to have everything in this is going to help with the distinction, especially this final column, compare and contrast. But this bit at the bottom about style, the style of animation, that is again a little element for the distinction level. Okay, so we have stop motion animation and we have cell animation. So what would be the differences in the way that is made? Is there a cost implication? Is there a time frame? How long would it take to make these ones? What would one way be more difficult than the other? Okay, style, compare the styles of the animation. And the last thing, and then I'm going to shut up, is this last column here, compare and contrast. You can put pictures in all the way through. If you talk about the characters and the locations and the environments, I would expect to see some pictures in here, really. This is for the distinction, and some of you are maybe a bit afraid of talking about the cultural differences. You're thinking about how Britain is represented and how Japan is being represented here. So there are cultural differences, and one kind of, it's a little bit of a stereotype, but one thing that you could use, and I'm giving this to you to use, is this idea, this idea that the British one is more concerned about class, status, Britishness, and the Japanese one is a bit more spiritual. Okay, it's about a connection with nature, it's about a connection with your ancestors, it's about a connection with your cultural history, and we've got a juxtaposition here with a binary opposition that was concerned about the natural world and the urban world. Okay, so is that a concern that is happening in a country like Japan that is becoming very, very urbanized? Do they feel that they are losing that connection with the natural world and the spiritual world because their country is becoming so urbanized? Mic drop. Okay, so I've given you a lot to think about there. Lots and lots to think about. Let me just stop the recording, and then I'm going to give you some further instructions. Scott, before I stop the recording, is there anything that you want to add? Are you still there?
Yeah, Andrew's asked a couple of questions there. So Andrew's Curtis has pointed out that Spirited Away, Miyazaki said it was aimed at children. I think he did initially intend it for children, but I read that he also did not dumb down the themes so that it would appeal to the whole family, and that it would appeal to adults and small children. So
so that's why you've got primary and secondary audiences to think about in that column. Yeah, good point there. And if you've got a quote from the director, then use it.
That's a good point, Owen. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I'm just gonna take off the recording, and then we can do these questions. Stop.